Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome to your Edpuzzle homework tonight, dealing with making equivalent fractions. So we're going to talk a lot about tonight is how do we make fractions that take up the same amount of space? All right, so our big target for tonight says I can identify equivalent common fractions. So again, we're going to talk a lot about making fractions that take up the same amount of space. All right, so remember, equivalent fractions are fractions that take up the same amount of space. Now, we saw this in our books today, okay? And here I'm going to actually show you what's really going on, okay? So notice when I look at this fraction here with my shape, I've got one piece colored in. That means I'd have 1 in my numerator. And it takes me 3 pieces to make the whole, which means I'd have 3 in the denominator. So this really says, yeah, very good, 1/3. Okay. Now here's the thing though, and we're going to talk more about this after break when we come back. But making equivalent fractions will really help us when we start doing the next step. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to think about what could I turn this into that's still going to take up the same amount of space. So notice what we're doing here in my organizer. I'm trying to go from thirds to, I'm trying to go to sixths. And here's the thing. I can change thirds into sixths by using multiplication, but I can also do that by cutting my pieces into something. What would I cut thirds into to make sixths? Yeah, very good. I'd have to cut my thirds in half because think about what happens when I do that. If I take my thirds, notice I cut one of my thirds in half, I cut another one in half, and I cut the last one in half. Notice what I'm left with when I do that. I'm left with 6 pieces, and I'm actually going to scoot this down because it's not right in the middle. That looks better, okay? I'm left with 6 pieces. So I didn't make the whole any bigger. I didn't make the pieces any bigger. I didn't color in any more. All I did was I broke those pieces into something else, okay? Or in this case, I doubled them. I multiplied my 3 pieces, because this is what I had before. I multiplied those 3 pieces by 2. So my number that would go in the organizer here would be a 2, because 3 times 2 is 6. Now remember we talked the other day too about whatever you do to the bottom or your denominator, you're also going to do to the top. Because notice what I did here. Look at my yellow piece. Before I only had 1 yellow piece. Now I've got 2. So 1, again, I'm going to do the exact same thing to the top, times 2. My answer is going to be 2. I've got 2 yellow pieces. So 1/3, which is what it showed before when I had this, 1/3, that's what I got, takes up the same amount of space as 2/6. Notice I didn't color anything more. They still take up the same amount of space. All I did though was I made my pieces a little smaller. I made an extra cut in my pie or in my pizza. Okay, I made an extra cut and that made more pieces. All right. Now, what if I'd have done this though? What if instead of wanting to change this into sixths, I wanted to change this into ninths? Okay, so think about what I got to do here. I'm not just going to cut the pieces in half. I've got to cut them into thirds because I had 3 pieces. If I cut every piece into 3 equal pieces, I'd have 9 when I'm all done, right? Yep, because 3 times 3 would be 9. And again, like we said, whatever you do to the bottom, you're going to do to the top. So how many yellow pieces do you have now? Yeah, you've got 3. Again, you didn't change how much you colored in. You just broke your pieces into smaller parts. Okay. Notice the hole's still the same size as well. Okay. So I'm going to put a couple problems there at the end. Do your best on those. Make sure you copy everything down and fill in the blanks. Have a good night. Make smart choices.